Nickel Boys is an adaptation of a 2019 novel by Colson Whitehead, which I confess that I haven't read. Time magazine said it was one of the best books of the decade. Story follows two African-American boys, Elwood and Turner. Elwood is a smart kid with a college future in Jim Crow-era Florida, who is picked up by the police and sent to this abusive reform school, Nickel Academy. It's a brutal institution. Inmates are denied access to their families. All manner of horrible abuses meted out. And it's based on a real-life institution that operated for over a century, in which, after it had closed, numerous unmarked graves were found. I mean, in real life, there is a horrible story behind this. So in the Nickel, Elwood meets Turner, and they become sort of soulmates, even though they've got very, very different approaches to life, philosophies on life. They find friendship, even as the inmates are forced to compete in what are effectively sort of deadly competitions. So the thing is, the subject matter is grim. There's no getting around that. What's remarkable about the film is how weirdly full of love it is. That it's about the experience of finding love, and I mean love in the broadest sense of the word, in this brutally cold environment, and being passed from one character to another. Obviously, the director was a photographer before, and made Hale County This Morning, This Evening, which we talked about. That is, it was Oscar nominated, and it was a very expressive, artistic, experiential documentary. And it clearly laid the groundwork for Nickel Boys, because in Nickel Boys, the story is told from this, POV perspective, although not the POV, not the point of view of one character. You see the story from the point of view of characters, plural. And the way in which this was done, I mean, I only know this from reading a very long article about it, was that with the DP Jamafray and the editor, Nicolas Monsour, they set out to create this experiential film. Sometimes the actors would be operating the cameras themselves. Sometimes, I mean, it's just the sheer technicals of it are quite dazzling. And although I haven't, as I said before, I haven't yet heard your interview, I read the director saying that they started not with a script, but with a series of visual images, which they then put together as a kind of collage storyboard, from which the co-writer, Jocelyn Barnes, then got to work on what we would now think of more traditionally as a script. This all sounds madly contrived, but the weird thing about it is that when you watch the film, it isn't contrived at all. There is a scene in it, and you'll know exactly the scene. So in fact, you may have talked about this in the interview, in which Aunjanue Ellis-Taylor, who is brilliant, has to hug someone in the absence of someone else, which is it sounds like a narrative contrivance. And we see that hug from the point of view of the person who is receiving it, and who is then going to pass on that hug or that love to somebody else. And the really weird thing about it is that if you describe it as I just did, it sounds weird and mechanical. But when you see the film, I guarantee you this is going to be one of the scenes, that people will talk about for years to come. And we've talked time and again about, Roger Ebert saying cinema is a machine for creating empathy. What the POV perspectives of the film do, I think, is create empathy. But when cinema is done properly, it genuinely shows you the world through other people's experience, through other people's eyes. And I think that's what happens here. There's also a really interesting thing that as there's a section when the movie has to jump around in time in order to tell the story. And the way in which the POV of the film works moves to behind one of the characters. And although it's very organic, but I think what it's doing is it's flagging up. It's a different time, a different state of mind, a different state of being. I mean, in fact, even a difference of identity. So whilst all this stuff is going on, it's intercut with, footage of the Apollo mission going around the dark side of the moon, of Martin Luther King inspiring and being assassinated. Fabulous score by Alex Summers and Scott Lario. Shaping up as one of the major awards contenders of the year for 2024. Obviously, from our point of view, this is a 2025 release, but it is remarkable. And whilst I was watching it, I was thinking of the kind of response that I had to Moonlight the first time I saw Moonlight, about thinking, this is this really is a very, very impressive piece of work. And I think Nickel Boys, I think Nickel Boys gets you in the feels because it does something that is so visually thought through. It is so purely cinematic in the way in which it tells its story. Like I said, the idea of starting with these photographs and images, it somehow it just bypasses everything and gets right into your emotional core. I thought it was very, very powerful, and trying to analyze why afterwards is quite complicated because it's a very complicated process. But when you watch it, it is simplicity itself because it makes emotional sense.
Also, and I don't think we've said this ever, maybe, it looks unlike any other film, certainly any other film this year. I haven't. Yeah. I was talking about this with a colleague who said that, Peep Show used a similar technique, but I've never, because you just explained the hug, and when that happens, you think, okay, I don't think I've ever seen anybody try this in a mainstream film. And although cinema is art, this feels like art with a capital A. You actually have to visualize this before you can understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, I agree completely. But when you say art, you mean art in the best sense of the word. I know sometimes there's minutes somebody hears the word art, whichever studio head it was, when I hear the word art, I head for the exit. But it is art. I mean, all cinema is art. Even Steven Seagal movies are art on some level. But the artistry involved in telling this story, and it's there's a phrase that Douglas Adams uses once, which is something is easier said than done. In the case of this, it looks like it's easier done than said because when you watch it, it just makes sense. But when you try to explain what it was that you watched and how you watched it, I mean, theses will be written about that hug.
Also, it's just worth mentioning in passing, although Jim Crow is used as a kind of a shorthand, it is worth.
Oh, sorry, yes.
No, but it's but particularly American filmmakers will use this, assuming that everybody understands that it was a Jim Crow was a theatrical character, came out of minstrel shows, and that whole Jim Crow period, end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, up until late 1960s, I think, was basically used as a term to insult African Americans. That's what it was, and they were the laws to sort of enforce racial segregation. But Jim Crow is a kind of a useful shorthand. But I wonder sometimes maybe this is the old BBC person just going, well, hang on, does everyone know what that means? I'm not sure. Do you think?
Well, I think that what you've done is as always, what was the phrase that was used? The choric role, the contextualizing role. So,
yes, the Greek chorus explaining what the hell is going on. But really, I mean, you can describe it, but until someone has seen the film, you might listen to what Marcus said and go, okay, I'm going to go and see that. Or you might think, well, I'm not quite sure it's for me, but you have to see it before you can form an opinion. Yeah. Being told the story, it's and it's a grim story and it's a grim film, but it's also a very beautiful film.
But do you agree with that fundamental thing that it is grim, but it is actually about the way in which love is passed from one character to another, even identity is, that there is a lot of love and life in a story that is very, very dark.
Yes. I also wondered if, in trying to put us in their place, I wonder if it was almost like we were being a part of their process, so that because there is grim stuff that happens. That's Hamish Linklater again, who is the vampire priest. We talked about him last year, I think. Anyway, he does a lot of the bad stuff. But when you process it, you probably don't remember all the horrendous details. You do drop out and you see other images and you see sky and you see the news because that's what you have to do. So that's what the film does. I don't know if that's what they were trying to do, but
although you might now know that because you might have asked Ramel Ross that question.
Yes, that's right. So I know it and I sort of don't know it.
Yes.
Anyway, so you think that's going to be just explain the awards then? Awards next year?
No, this year, yeah, because obviously,
2025.
From everyone else's point of view, this is basically it's a 2024 film. It's just for here in the UK. Like, for example, the reason it's this will be the thing that when we get to the end of next year and we ask people for their favorite films of 2025, people will need to be reminded that this opened at the very beginning of January 2025 in the UK. But it's going to be it's a very big awards contender this year, because obviously awards are tied to the American release system. Even the BAFTAs are tied to the American release dates.